Summer 1943, Camp Crossville, Tennessee. The air was thick and heavy, a humid blanket that clung to the skin. But the heat was the least of the German soldiers' astonishment. Before him, an everyday object held a power that transcended military might, a simple glass bottle. The brown liquid fizzing inside mesmerized the veteran of North Africa, a man who had subsisted for 2 years on hard biscuits and ersatz coffee. He'd fought Rommel's war, expecting to starve in an American prison camp as Nazi propaganda promised brutality. Instead, this sweet, carbonated drink was called Coca-Cola. It cost 5 cents at the camp canteen, the same price, the guards informed him, that American children paid with their allowances. This wasn't a ration or a prize. It was a casual, everyday commodity. This single 5-cent item, along with the news that ice cream was a routine dessert, represented an impossibility made real. This was the first lesson in the systematic demolition of an empire. Across American camps that summer, nearly 400,000 German prisoners would confront a reality that contradicted everything Nazi propaganda had taught them about American weakness. These simple foods, treats most German children had never tasted, would systematically demolish Nazi ideology more effectively than any propaganda program. The mathematics of American abundance were about to be written in sugar and carbonation, revealing an industrial capacity that rendered German deprivation not a noble sacrifice, but needless suffering. The men who expected starvation were about to drink the future. The men of the Afrika Korps, hardened by years of desert fighting under Rommel's leadership, arrived in captivity wearing thick layers of ideological armor. They were veteran desert fighters who had pushed the British back to Egypt and believed implicitly in the narrative of German superiority and the strength derived from sacrifice. Nazi propaganda had rigorously prepared them for the precise scenario of defeat. They expected harsh treatment, American brutality, and starvation. They had been taught that America was a nation defined by chaos and weakness, a decadent, divided culture that lacked the racial purity and moral fortitude of the Third Reich. Their confidence was rooted in the noble deprivation. Believing their ability to subsist on hard biscuits and minimal rations proved their racial and spiritual fitness for war. This deep-seated conviction that American plenty was a sign of fundamental fragility was the psychological wall that their captors were about to systematically dismantle. The collapse of the Afrika Korps in Tunisia during May 1943 delivered approximately 250,000 German and Italian soldiers into Allied hands. These veteran desert fighters, who had been pushed back to Egypt, fully expected the promised American brutality and starvation. Instead, their psychological armor suffered its first immediate crack within hours of their surrender. They encountered the American K-rations. These field rations, which American soldiers often complained about, were treated as genuine treasures by the newly captive Germans. Each pack contained crackers, processed cheese, candy, fruit bars, instant coffee, sugar, and cigarettes, a veritable feast for men who had subsisted for months on minimal rations. According to military records, the superior treatment continued at the processing camps in North Africa. The U.S. Army served pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, and milk, foods that had virtually vanished from German military rations years earlier. The systematic feeding of the enemy with such rich food began immediately, acting as tangible proof, by contradiction, that shattered the Nazi prophecy of American deprivation. We expected to be starved as prisoners. Instead, the Americans fed us better than our own army had. This initial confusion over American resources marked the beginning of their education. The journey across the Atlantic in the summer of 1943 was no ordinary troop transport. It was an intensive education in American abundance for the German POWs. Crammed into the holds of Liberty ships, the prisoners who expected a bare-bones survival trip instead witnessed the awe-inspiring scale of American production firsthand. These cargo vessels themselves were symbols of industrial might. At the peak of wartime production, a new Liberty ship was completed roughly 42 hours, a feat of standardization and output unimaginable to the German war machine. More astonishing than the shipbuilding speed was the diet. Naval records confirm that the prisoners received 3,500-calorie daily rations, which often matched or exceeded the provisions given to the American crew. Their meals included fresh bread, meat, vegetables, and hot coffee with ample sugar and real milk. The most profound shock, the unforgettable element of luxury, was the ice cream. On multiple occasions, these hardened veterans were served a frozen dessert, often made fresh right on board using the ship's dedicated ice cream maker. The contrast was stark. While Germany's military faced increasing logistical nightmares and rationing for its own troops, the American Navy allocated space, time, and precious resources to serve a frozen luxury to its captured enemies. This display of unnecessary abundance was the first clear sign that the ideological war had already been lost. The sight of the American coastline, after weeks at sea, presented the German prisoners with an American Nazi propaganda declared impossible. Disembarking at ports like Norfolk, Virginia, the men encountered a level of sheer functional infrastructure that dwarfed anything they had ever seen. The Norfolk Naval Base, sprawling over its 4,300 acres, demonstrated a logistical organization that made the German port systems look rudimentary. But the real visual shock came not from the military might, but from the everyday consumerism. A quick glance into the port exchanges revealed shelves stocked high with candy bars, cigarettes, and soft drinks, all sold for the mundane price of 5 cents. This ubiquitous availability of luxury goods was the first sign of a civilian economy operating at a scale that exceeded the Reich's total military output. The journey inland across the continent further solidified this image. Instead of being packed into the traditional European cattle cars used for troop transport, the prisoners traveled in standard American passenger coaches. They were often served full dining car meals, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, freshly baked pie, and coffee, while watching the boundless American landscape roll by. This was a nation that could afford to transport and feed its enemies with better accommodations than German citizens experienced in wartime. This sight of immense functional infrastructure and endless casual abundance immediately validated the scale of American power, normalizing the impossible and deepening the psychological wound inflicted on Nazi ideology. The German prisoners were housed in a system that did more than merely adhere to the Geneva Convention. It lavishly exceeded it, offering amenities like electric lights, hot water, and heated barracks. Yet the true center of ideological demolition was the Camp Exchange, or PX store. This small shop was the physical manifestation of America's economic superiority. It was consistently stocked with a variety of consumer goods that had been deemed unobtainable luxuries or military necessities back in the Reich. The shelves overflowed with multiple soft drink brands like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper, alongside an abundance of different candy bars, fresh fruit, and even a low-alcohol 3.2% beer. Where permitted, ice cream, that symbol of ultimate decadence, was sold regularly. This abundance was directly translated into tangible empowerment through wages. Prisoners earned approximately 80 cents a day for their labor, meaning they could buy 16 items priced at 5 cents each. This created a new intoxicating reality, the ability to purchase an abundance of luxury goods that was simply beyond German imagination. They saw with their own eyes that American productive capacity was so vast it could easily outfit its soldiers, supply its civilians, and still provide unlimited access to consumer choice for its captured enemies. The PX was proof that the very economic system the Nazis called decadent was in fact the most potent force on Earth. Of all the consumer goods the prisoners encountered, Coca-Cola stood as the ultimate symbol of American might. Its sheer ubiquity was a living refutation of Nazi claims that American industry was chaotic and inefficient. The scale of production was staggering. Military procurement records show that the company churned out over 5 billion bottles in 1943 alone. This was not merely mass production, it was a logistics miracle built around the unwavering commitment to sell the soft drink for 5 cents worldwide. For the technically minded German prisoners, the drink's standardization was perhaps the most confounding feature. A bottle of Coca-Cola tasted identical whether consumed in Maine or Texas. This feat of chemical engineering and quality control, ensuring perfect flavor consistency across thousands of miles,
exceeded anything the fragmented and centrally controlled German industry could achieve. It proved that American strength was rooted in an organized, efficient, and decentralized system of mass production that the Nazis had derided as decadent capitalism. At Camp Hearn in Texas, for example, prisoners watched their local exchange consume over 7,000 bottles weekly, casually demonstrating a level of localized abundance that was absolutely devastating to the myth of German industrial superiority. The carbonated liquid was not just a treat. It was a visible, drinkable testament to the power of American industrial democracy.
The role of ice cream in the American prison system provided the German POWs with the ultimate contradiction of priorities. In the Third Reich, ice cream was virtually non-existent, a vanished luxury due to wartime rationing of sugar and dairy. In the US military, however, it was classified as an essential for morale. This designation was taken so seriously that the Navy built specialized ice cream ships to serve the Pacific Fleet. The prisoners saw this firsthand. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, for the 4th of July in 1943, they watched as gallons of the frozen dessert were produced right there on the premises using hand-cranked freezers. The casual, almost wasteful use of traditionally scarce resources, ice in July, fresh cream, and ample sugar, all for an entertainment food, demonstrated a level of national wealth that Germans simply could not fathom. This abundance was not restricted to a single flavor. The POWs were often served varieties like chocolate, vanilla, and butter pecan, far exceeding anything available in pre-war Germany. The very fact that a luxury item was deemed a morale necessity for their soldiers and subsequently for their captives showed a profound level of prosperity and concern for comfort, completely foreign to the austere, deprivation-focused German worldview. The ice cream was proof that America could afford to treat even its defeated enemies with a generosity that signaled its overwhelming economic victory. The simple, white, granular presence of sugar delivered one of the greatest economic shocks to the German prisoners. At home, German civilians were strictly rationed, receiving barely 280 grams of sugar monthly. Yet, in the American mess halls, sugar was present in open bowls on every table, available for unlimited use. This gulf in economic realities was starkly highlighted by the infamous incident at Camp Aliceville. Prisoner work details observed American kitchen staff opting to simply discard hundreds of pounds of hardened sugar that had become slightly unusable, rather than go through the minimal effort of attempting to recover or reprocess it. This casual attitude toward a commodity that meant the difference between a sweet treat and a bland life in Germany caused genuine distress and shock among the POWs. This was the shock of democratic waste. The casual discarding of a strictly rationed, precious commodity illustrated that American abundance was so immense it could afford to throw away valuable goods. It was a tangible, undeniable display of wealth that shattered the core Nazi belief in scarcity and the need for martial deprivation. Chocolate, another highly rationed commodity in the Third Reich, further revealed the vastness of the American economy. The sheer scale was a revelation. Military procurement alone purchased a staggering 380 million pounds of chocolate during the war. The prisoners, who would have once considered a single chocolate bar a rare luxury, were now confronted with an overwhelming display of democratic choice. They observed American personnel casually expressing preferences among different high-quality brands, Hershey, Mars, and Nestle, picking one over the other without a second thought. This ability to choose among multiple, abundant products highlighted the success of the competitive market system that fueled American production. Furthermore, regular supplements from Red Cross packages delivered luxury chocolate items that far exceeded German basic rations, often destined for the black market if they reached civilians at all. This casual, continuous flow of high-quality goods demonstrated that the American system was designed for surplus, not scarcity, offering its enemies a choice of luxuries that its own citizens were being denied. The arrival of Thanksgiving 1943 provided a prime, powerful example of American organizational awe. The logistical challenge was immense.
the military was responsible for providing a complete traditional Thanksgiving dinner to millions of servicemen worldwide, plus the nearly 425,000 enemy prisoners of war on U.S. soil. The fact that the U.S. Army successfully delivered this massive, non-essential feast to every single prison camp demonstrated a coordinated abundance that shattered the German concept of centralized control. Most critically, the German prisoners received the exact same meal as American soldiers. This act of eating the same delivered a profound psychological blow of equality of treatment that directly contradicted the core Nazi dogma of racial hierarchy. It proved that American might was not just about material abundance, but about a profound organizational capacity rooted in a humane moral strength. This system could afford to treat its enemies with lavish generosity, an astonishing demonstration of power through capability, not through cruelty. The most profound psychological blow often came not from the military system, but from the unexpected generosity of American civilians, particularly during Christmas 1943. Nazi ideology demanded that the enemy be viewed as inherently evil and merciless. This expectation was shattered when local communities and charitable groups began demonstrating genuine kindness toward their captives. The American Friends Service Committee, for instance, distributed over 50,000 packages to the POWs. In towns like Tonkawa, Oklahoma, and Hearne, Texas, local citizens, often women, organized efforts to deliver homemade cookies, candy, and small comfort items to the camps. This deliberate, unbidden civilian kindness toward enemies fundamentally challenged the Nazi worldview. It demonstrated a societal moral superiority, a nation so prosperous and confident that it could afford mercy. This act of giving proved that American strength was derived from compassion and abundance, showcasing strength through mercy rather than vengeance. The prisoners suddenly faced the bewildering truth that the people they were taught to hate were in fact capable of profound, illogical goodwill. By 1944, the increasing utilization of POW labor brought an estimated 100,000 prisoners out of the immediate confines of the camps and into the vast American economy. This exposure was not simply work, it was a devastating, intimate reality check that shattered any lingering belief that American abundance was a lie or temporary facade. Working in American food production, particularly in agriculture and canneries, gave them a first-hand look at the sheer, almost unthinkable scale of output. In the cherry orchards of Michigan, prisoners were astonished to see tons of high-quality fruit being harvested, much of which was destined solely for decorative items like maraschino cherries. At canneries, the technically minded Germans were shocked to observe quality control standards that rejected perfectly edible food merely for minor blemishes or size inconsistencies. This daily, casual waste demolished the German mentality of scarcity. Furthermore, the scale of mechanized agriculture in the sugar beet fields of Colorado and Nebraska demonstrated a level of efficiency and mechanization beyond German achievement. They realized the American system could produce so much so quickly that their own nation's industrial output was relatively dwarfed. The POWs no longer just read about American wealth, they were physically integrated into the machine that created it, confirming that this abundance was not a propaganda trick, but an undeniable, overwhelming truth.
The most painful realization for the German POWs often came from observing the seemingly unremarkable daily lives of American children. Through their labor details, they witnessed the implementation of early, organized school lunch programs, which provided children with fresh milk, essential protein, and vegetables. The sheer logistical feat required to ensure the daily delivery of fresh milk to thousands of schools across a continent demonstrated an organizational capacity that the centralized German state couldn't consistently achieve even for its frontline military supplies. But the moment of future shock was undeniably the casual consumerism of the youth. The Germans saw American children spending nickels to buy their own ice cream, sodas, and candy bars at school or from local vendors. The direct, heart-wrenching comparison to home was immediate and devastating.
While German children faced severe food shortages and were taught to endure hunger for the Reich, American children enjoyed a daily routine of effortless abundance. This stark contrast, the difference between the deprivation of their own families and the easy, accessible wealth enjoyed by the children of their enemy, created a profound, painful realization of their nation's failure. The war's economic verdict was delivered not by tank battles, but by the sight of a child with a pocket full of change and a melting cone of ice cream. As minimum security prisoners began working outside the wire, a select few were permitted to eat at local American diners. This seemingly small allowance provided a devastating, close-up view of democratic equality. The menus offered meals, steak and eggs, full dinners, thick slices of pie that would have graced elite German establishments, yet here they were, available to anyone with modest funds. The POWs noted the prices. A hamburger was 25 cents, pie was 15 cents, and a full dinner rarely exceeded 75 cents. The psychological revelation was not just the food's quality or price, but the equality of service. A local factory worker and a well-dressed bank president would sit at adjacent counter stools, served the identical meal by the same waitress for the same price. There was no separate superior menu for the wealthy or the politically connected. This exposure to a classless consumer culture directly contradicted the rigid German social stratification and hierarchy enforced by the Nazi Party. The diner was a vibrant, functioning microcosm of America's economic system, proving that its abundance extended without prejudice to the ordinary citizen, a concept entirely foreign to their world. The ultimate and most devastating blow to the Nazi worldview was delivered by simple data as a weapon, presenting an irrefutable story of economic failure. The German prisoners could argue propaganda or rationalize the why, but they could not dispute the hard facts of the kitchen. A dramatic side-by-side comparison revealed the totality of Nazi failure. American POW consumption was 3,300 to 3,600 calories per day. The German civilian rations were 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day. The American POW consumption was approximately 4 pounds of sugar per month with unlimited use. The German civilian rations were 280 grams per month. The American POW consumption was fresh milk and ice cream served regularly. The German civilian rations were virtually non-existent. The stunning, overarching conclusion was that enemy prisoners ate better than German civilians. The American logistical system was so vast that it extended its abundance even to its defeated foes, providing them with the diet necessary for heavy labor, which was twice that of a hungry German at home. This was the ultimate evidence. It proved that the hardship and deprivation demanded by the Nazi regime were not signs of noble sacrifice, but signals of profound economic and ideological failure. The German soldiers were forced to accept the painful truth: their state had failed them materially, while their enemy demonstrated an overwhelming, systematic ability to create wealth for all. The economic and ideological transformation reached its zenith in late 1944, with a stunning reversal of roles. German POWs began sending American food packages to their starving relatives back in Germany. Utilizing the wages they earned for their labor, the prisoners could purchase items like chocolate, instant coffee, and canned goods from the camp exchanges. Records confirm that over 11 million parcels were ultimately sent. The powerful, tangible impact of this act cannot be overstated. German families facing severe food shortages in freedom were receiving American abundance delivered by their imprisoned sons and husbands. This provided the ultimate, undeniable proof of their nation's defeat. The fact that the enemy country was not only feeding its captives better than its own government was feeding its citizens, but also enabling those captives to become the sole source of life-saving luxury goods for their families, delivered a profound message of betrayal of the state. This transaction effectively sealed the failure of Nazi ideology, demonstrating that the only way to obtain the promised German plenty was to accept it indirectly from the hands of the Americans. When the war finally ended in 1945 and repatriation began, the German prisoners did not return home as defeated, emaciated men. Instead, they returned healthier than when they were captured, often carrying a final parting gift of Red Cross packages filled with chocolate, coffee, and cigarettes. This was the moment of the final transformation. They had spent years immersed in a material reality that invalidated every premise of the Nazi state.
These former POWs became the most crucial and most unexpected advocates for the Marshall Plan. Their testimony that America was a nation so wealthy and so organized that it could afford to not just feed its enemies, but literally rebuild its enemies was invaluable. Their personal stories about casual abundance influenced German acceptance of American aid and fostered the cooperative spirit that led to West Germany's economic miracle. They returned with a new mental model, that true national power came from creation rather than conquest, and that the system of mass production could make luxuries affordable for everyone. They had learned that consumer abundance creates political stability, a lesson they carried into the founding of the new German Republic. They were freedom's most unlikely ambassadors, living proof of America's long-term strategic victory. The final truth, confirmed by extensive research from historians like Arnold Kramer, is that casual American plenty accomplished the complete demolition of Nazi superiority myths. The ideological war was settled not on the battlefield, but in the mess halls and camp exchanges of the American South. The most enduring legacy rests in the powerful sensory memories carried home by the men. One former prisoner's reflection encapsulated the emotional climax of the experience. We found a nation that could give ice cream to enemies. That's when we knew we had lost more than a war. We had lost our entire worldview. Another, reflecting on the symbolic core of the experience, stated, "My first Coca-Cola was like drinking the future. It was sweet, fizzing, completely unnecessary, and available to anyone for a nickel. That drink contained everything Nazi Germany wasn't." This became the memorable takeaway. The American model of economic abundance, democratic choice, and human generosity was an overwhelmingly powerful force. The German prisoners who couldn't believe such abundance existed became its greatest, most effective witnesses. They carried home the revolutionary truth that prosperity came from freedom, not conquest. Their final, resonant memory, the psychological core of the entire conflict, was clear and enduring. They had tasted democracy, and it was sweet.